Welcome to today's workshop on syllabus and assignment creation. Before we dive fully into this topic, we're going to have Caitlin from the grad college come up and share a few announcements with us.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to give the spiel that Ashley usually does at these. So we have a couple programs that are coming up that we want you guys to know about. So the first one is the Graduate Rebel Ambassadors Program. This is a wonderful opportunity. You get to work directly with Dr. Corrigan, who of course is Dean of the Graduate College. She's wonderful. You also get to work with other awesome graduate college staff, and what you do is you're the face of the graduate college. So if they need you to attend a couple of events that feature alumni or important community members or even just faculty members from the university, you go and represent your own research as well as sort of the larger graduate community. So applications are due October 1st. Please apply. It's a great opportunity, and as an even better incentive if you, besides looking great on your CV, if you complete a year long, you also get a $500 access scholarship at the end. So that's awesome, goes towards research. And then we have the research week coming up, and if you guys attend events, I don't actually know how, so every graduate college event that you attend, your name gets put into a drawing, and you get a $250, and if you're pulled from the drawing, you actually get a $250 access grant. So again, get to hear about really awesome things. There's a PhD Moody 2 screening, you have research panel with graduate students, so just really wonderful opportunities to learn and be more informed, and then of course the incentive. And then these are more for, these are graduate student resources and just sort of things to know as a graduate rebel. So pick these up, and if you have first year students, these are really helpful to people that just are starting your program because it's just a whole bunch of awesome resources that you might know, but a lot of incoming students don't know, so it's really valuable. And then of course, everyone hopefully remembers the 3-minute thesis competition from last year. Well, it's coming up, and there is a workshop next Wednesday that talks a little bit about it and goes over some really important points about how to kind of do it. And of course, everyone should do it because it's a wonderful experience. You get to have to do your research in 3 minutes, and that's always a challenge, but also fun. So that's it.
Thank you, Caitlin.
What's the due date on submissions for that? Because I've seen the dates for what the programs actually have.
So they're still finalizing that. The actual competition is November 2nd through November 6th, but they should have that at the workshop next week. But if you send Valerie an email, she'll know, hopefully by next week.
And a function that 3-minute thesis competition serves is imagine you're in an elevator with some would-be funder of your research, or whatever it may be, and you got 3 minutes. What are you doing? Why is it important? Why should people care? And you should be very quick in being able to articulate those points very well and for a general audience. So this is actually good training for that purpose.
I actually have a great story to say about that, which is that one of the people who won last year got a Fulbright for this year, and one of the things that the Fulbright committee complimented him on was his basically elevator speech, which he worked on in the grad slam last year.
So what a great synergy. So if you're putting out for grant applications, this is something that will come back to be a benefit in multiple contexts as well. So again, thanks to all of you for joining us. How many of you are in the teaching certificate program? I recognize familiar faces from our orientation, quite a few. So this will be excellent. I think you'll find this quite helpful as part of your menu of options for the teaching certificate. And even if you're not, I think you'll find this very informative as well. So what we've done is we've put together a panel of participants today who come from different corners of the academic world. That way you get sort of complementary perspectives on the general topic of syllabus and assignment creation. So Dr. Greg Borchard comes to us out of the Greenspun School of Journalism, and you'll be writing this up for some kind of media outlet afterwards, I assume, depending on how many sparks fly. We'll see.
Anthropology.
And then Dr. Elizabeth Nelson comes to us from history, who taught here for over a decade, so has lots of experience. And she'll talk about the history of syllabi, or maybe not.
Yeah, no, probably not.
Probably not. And then we have Ashok Sudhakar, who was a award winner in our graduate teaching. He received a graduate teaching award earlier this year, and has done an impressive set of things, generally speaking, while also earning PhDs this fall. It'll be December, right? It'll be official in both public affairs and computer and electrical engineering, right? So he's had a really fascinating career, but also has done some really creative experimental things with UNLV undergraduates to get them out of a classroom and allow them terrific opportunities for experiential learning. So collectively, I think we'll hear a lot of interesting things. I've asked each of them to give us sort sort of, they're pointers in about 10 minutes respectively. We'll go one to the next, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as well. So that way, the questions that are on your mind as you're designing syllabi or assignments, we'll have an opportunity to all kind of share ideas about things that might work or might not work, and so forth. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Borchard.
Hi, thanks. My name's Greg Borchard. I'm in the School of Journalism at UNLV, of course. Started here back in 2003, so this is 12 years, going on 13. And I can say for starters, there have been a number of changes in the way we deliver syllabi over the years. For starters, I need to check with you just to get a gauge for what you may need to hear or not hear. How many of you have developed a syllabus so far already? Okay, good. I mean, half and half, that'll help. And those of you who have, how many of you have used exclusively hard copy? Okay, good. I think everyone's using online. That's one of the changes I've seen over the years is initially there was heavy reliance on hard copy. Web Campus did start to take off right around the time I showed up, and I gotta admit, it was kind of clunky. Not sure how many people would back me on this, but it was very difficult to use. I got in the habit right off the bat of using my own faculty website as my primary source of syllabus information. Now, over the years, Web Campus has gotten a lot better, and there have been semesters where I've relied on Web Campus as the primary source for syllabi and lessons and everything else, but in the end, you can do either one. I found this out through a number of different channels that the university's okay with people using their faculty server space to deliver information. It's encouraged that you use Web Campus because, if for no other reason, that's what the students are using. They're used to getting on Web Campus. And I still, to this day, when I'm using my own server space, I'll get questions from students saying, where can I find this on Web Campus? And some semesters they can't. Just so you know, I have used both. Here's the Web Campus version of the same course we'll take a look at in just a bit. One of the first pointers I could give you right off the bat is just make sure your contact information is visible immediately and throughout. Don't assume that just because it may be on page one that somebody's going to be able to find it very easily. I've got it on my home page, I've got my schedule here. The same information is repeated on all the different syllabi that show up as well. You can't take for granted that somebody's going to be able to find this on their first shot. So, got all sorts of embedded hyperlinks here too that'll bring you other sources and other sites. This comes in real handy in journalism especially because I can redirect to outside sources without any trouble. This is all external. Anybody from anywhere in the world can access this page, which I suppose could be a disadvantage. You don't want to put anything and everything on your page, especially if it's sensitive course materials, but there is an advantage to this as well. If I want to send information about what I've been doing, what my students have been doing off to just about anyone, all I have to do is embed a link. They don't need a password, they don't have to do it on Web Campus, it's already there. The courses I've done over the years have included primarily these two. Journalism 102, it's a news reporting and writing class, and the history of journalism is both an undergrad and a grad level class. I've just completed a 5-year stint as the grad coordinator in journalism, so some of these other classes are all in line with that. There's a colloquium everybody has to take. Again, one of the advantages to taking this web-based server faculty space approach towards this is it's all right there, and anybody, including students in any given class, can access information for all my classes. If they're interested in maybe going on to grad school after they finish their undergrad, well, they could have taken 413 and then they could jump into 708. They don't even need a password to get into the class. They can just preview some of the materials. And indeed, a lot of the material here is intro material to the grad classes here. We've got handbooks, samples, a general overview of the program right here. So far, I haven't had really any trouble working with IT on the page. Every once in a while, there'll be a major reset, and you have to go and get a password or get booted off for whatever reason, but IT's been very helpful in this respect. I think Web Campus, every once in a while, they have some troubles that you run into as far as glitches, but again, it's a matter of which is easiest for you. I will show you my writing and reporting class. We are doing this right now as we speak. We had a section yesterday. Again, all the contact information's here. Some of this is repeated from page 1. Got my graduate assistants information here. Now, the graduate assistants have been really helpful when it's time for Web Campus. I found one of the drawbacks of Web Campus is sometimes you get so into updates, constantly updating the information on Web Campus, that you spend more time on updates than you do the actual class itself. I would rather the grad student does that than me. But, when you've got it more or less set in stone as a syllabus here, should be good to go and not have to worry about too much high maintenance. The syllabus itself, that I know you're all here for, more or less begins here with the general introduction. If I could give you some pointers on creating content for your syllabus, check with your assessment coordinator and the department to see what kind of standards the school is emphasizing. You'll want to make sure that some of the language, at least in your introductory paragraphs, reflects the overall goals towards assessment. This is important in as much as what you're doing should have a contribution to the rest of the school. And you can see certain phrases popping up here in the intro that also show up in assessment reports. This makes life easier for administrators. It also makes life easier for students too. They know exactly what they're getting into in a lot of cases. This part, this opening part, has to be highly customized to exactly what it is you're doing in the class. There are other parts of syllabi that you can just copy and paste, and you have to. This is one of the university's policies. All syllabi need to have some standardized boilerplate language in it. And you'll see this woven throughout. Attendance is a big one, and I've always found more detail is better than less detail when it comes to attendance. You need to spell out the expectations clearly. For the most part, the university's expectations are fairly clear. The one item that we run into every semester is work-related absences, and these can be very problematic. Yeah, every once in a while there are work-related excused absences, but it's better to have it in writing that they're not excused. That way, if there's any question, you can point to it in the syllabus here. The grading criteria for this class especially is very explicit. It has to be. It's an intro level class, a lot of points at stake. It's considered a gateway class, and we really do need to enforce in this specific class, Journalism 102, what the expectations are before anyone goes off to the next level. The grade expectations themselves have been customized. These are obviously not uniform across campus. But I go into more detail on each and every assignment as we go too. Again, this is customized for the class. The language here also falls in line with assessment standards, goals that will show up in assessment reports. This is customized. The boilerplate language shows up here, and for the most part, you really can copy and paste material from the university. It generally comes out in an annual email. The one thing you want to make sure you do is check every year, because there are updates that come out every year. Sometimes they're small, they're changes in contact information. Say DRC may have moved the office. You want to make sure that you don't have old information here. Religious holidays, this gets updated from time to time too. I think at one point they didn't have a specific deadline, then they included a deadline within 2 weeks of the semester. Double check the language as it comes out. It usually comes out in a Word attachment sent out to all people who are teaching the class. The business about incomplete grades, that's pretty standardized. Do include it. If there's any doubt whether to include it or not, go ahead and include it, play it safe. That way, if there's any question about it at the end of the semester, you've got it in just in case. More standard boilerplate language here, classroom policies. Include it. It's amazing sometimes what sort of issues show up in the class, very unexpected from time to time. There have been students in my experience who have brought young children to class, which, you know, you want to sympathize and say, hey, welcome aboard, but, you know, the little kids can be very disruptive and scream and detract from other students in the class. That's actually against university policy. And if you were just to say, hey, don't bring your child to class anymore, somebody might get upset and be confused that you're discriminating against them, but actually it does constitute disruption. So these policies are meant to help instructors more than make life difficult for you. Academic misconduct, we hear about this every semester from Phil Burns. There are various shapes and forms of misconduct out there. One of the more common or recognizable ones is plagiarism. It's not the only one though. Some of the language here is broad enough to cover all sorts of different kinds of misconduct. So again, make sure you've got this in there. If you don't have some of this language in here, your syllabus is technically incomplete. I may have added this one. We've got a legal scholar on board over in journalism. Stephen Bates is a First Amendment guy. He dug up a reference to Nevada statutes even for misconduct. This may come in handy. It's actually against the law to plagiarize, so you can throw in some additional language if you'd like to. Copyright is a common university concern, and it has been a concern of mine. As I put these syllabi together and put them online and open to everybody, again, this is either an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on how you look at it. Copyright may be an issue with some of these items. Especially in the history of journalism course, I've used hundreds of images, copyrighted photographic images that go into PowerPoint slides. And the question initially was, should I be using this on my server in notes that are available to everyone? Is there any possibility this could be construed as a violation of copyright? Over time, it's become clear this is purely for academic purposes. I'm not making money off of posting those pictures, which in a lot of cases are so old anyway that the copyrights run out. But these are the sorts of questions you have to ask yourself as an instructor as well, whether you may be in violation of some of these policies here. DRC, more boilerplate, probably, I think, the most important one you could draw attention to as you're developing your syllabus. It's there for a reason. DRC has been very helpful with instructors and students. If it's not there, you could run into problems with a student who does have a legitimate issue and just wasn't aware how to go about addressing it with you. We want to make sure the information for DRC is up for their sake, for your sake, just again to make life easier. Other ones, the boilerplate business ends about here, by the way, but you will run into tutoring issues, writing center issues, rebel mail issues throughout. Look for these in the annual updates. The material customized for class shows up again. You can spend time developing a draft that works best for you, but I would say for starters, throw in the kitchen sink. And over time, you may find out, well, you don't really need everything, so you can reel it back. But it's better to include too much than not enough, at least for starters. The schedule itself is part of the syllabus. I've seen people treat them as two different documents. I always included them together. You can't have one without the other. But you could conceivably post your schedule in a different location if you wanted. But the schedule should be as detailed as possible, but not so detailed that it's cumbersome. Try to include direct references to all the dates where there are points due. It's going to help avoid some of the last-minute complaints about excused absences. That way, if they're gone on a day that an assignment's due, you can just point to the policy on excused absences there. This walks through all 15 weeks. And we end here with the final exam in Whitehall. Okay, the real fun is actually over here. Throughout the semester, I will post all course-related information in the margins. And again, this is, I think, another advantage to using this approach versus Web Campus. It's just easier to navigate. It's all right there. You can follow along. All the links are clumped together. You can take links off. You can add other links as we go. The most recent link that went up is right here for an AP quiz. Everybody's got access to this. Here are all the instructions for an upcoming quiz. It's on Monday. It's open workbook. Bring a Scantron. I'm a little old school in that respect. And one of the advantages to Web Campus is you can administer quizzes and tests online. We're finding it hard to coordinate a good time and place to administer quizzes where everybody's in the same location if it's not in class at the same time. So I figure, let's just do it in class. But the other items up here may be handy for reference in developing assignments. These are some of the tricks I picked up over the years in developing assessment reports. And whether you've had to do an assessment report on your own yet or not doesn't really matter. Somebody's going to ask you for assessment-like data somewhere along the line. Some of the information comes from an accredited journalism school. I went to the University of Florida when I was a grad student, and they had to meet accreditation on a regular basis. And the way they did it was by including very specific grading criteria in all of their assignments. That way when the assessment team would come in, instructors could hand over their assignments and say, this is what we did in class. It was all very clear, check, 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 check. And the assessment team could verify whether they were meeting their goals or not. Right now, the journalism school at UNLV is not accredited. They aren't planning on getting accredited, but the university itself is accredited. So whether you're accredited, your own department is or not, somebody in the university may ask you for information like this. Here's the assignment itself with the instructions read out. There are very specific AP journalistic languages woven throughout here as far as the expectation. This is a sort of material down here in the criteria that somebody in assessment would find really handy. There's another reason to do this. It's going to make life easier for you. It's not just a matter of checking off boxes. If a student has any questions about their score when you hand it back, you can point to the criteria. We're not dealing with subjective feelings. It's not about how I feel about somebody's assignment. You can say, well, you got an A because ... If somebody's really upset and they got an F and they say, why did I get an F? And I said, well, look at the criteria. It's all right there. Again, it's better to have it in writing. You can explain these things verbally, but if it's not in writing, you're not going to have anything to fall back on.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Please, yes.
So I found a rubric online that I like word for word, and I put in the link because I wanted to cite it on the syllabus. Is that good, or do you suggest a full citation or
Somebody else's rubric?
Yeah, and it said exactly what I wanted to say. So
You can. I would suggest that you make sure on the initial page where you're linking from, you have some kind of citation. When they get to the actual rubric itself, it'll be clear that it's not your own. Presumably there's additional citation information. That's a beauty of this approach. You can do the same thing on Web Campus too. You can post external links, but yeah, just to cover yourself, make sure that it's clear on the page that this is not yours. That way the other instructor won't get upset for
Right.
taking credit. I'll show a couple more and then turn it over to Elizabeth here. If you have any other questions, please jump in too. One of the other things I'll do in another class, this 413 class, is post lecture notes. And this is the area where I've kind of gone back and forth and deliberated as to whether I should post just text to avoid any copyright considerations, or if I should throw in everything. And over the years, the students have made it clear they want everything. And over the years, I figured out, okay, if I include pictures from the Library of Congress, there's no question at all that this is okay here. So I'll show you what some of these PowerPoint slides look like. These are originally PowerPoints with full graphics and colors and all the bells and whistles and everything. I take the PowerPoints and condense them down into 6 slide pages in a PDF form. And the rationale for doing this, and it's worked fairly well, is so that students can follow along with the PowerPoints, and they can have a hard copy in front of them and take notes so that they're not so obsessed with what's happening on the screen that they ask me to stop along the way. I can keep moving along. If they miss something along the way, they can go back and fill in the blanks. These notes have become fairly elaborate over time. I'll embed some hyperlinks along the way. This is pretty much the first couple weeks of class right here. We've got what, about 17 pages of 6 slides per page. And then there are more, right? This is just the first half of class. In effect, they're getting a free book out of the deal, written by an instructor. Yeah.
Do you find students still come to class even though they're getting all the notes?
Yeah, good question. I make as clear as humanly possible at the very beginning of class that the way you succeed for this one, 413 in particular, is to come to every class. If you rely on the notes alone, you will fail, because the spoken part directly complements the written part, and the written part alone is ultimately gibberish without that context. You have to have everything combined. People even get answers incorrect if they rely exclusively on the written notes. Some have tried it, they still do, but they're welcome to try. It shows up in the final grade.
Excuse me, if we want to develop our syllabus, is it any place that we actually go and sit and they check our syllabus, if there is anything wrong with that on the campus or?
An administrator or
Yes.
somebody else? Good question. The director of the department is ultimately responsible for making sure that individual instructors have appropriate required language, and sometimes they do. We do hear horror stories every once in a while of somebody who submits a one-page syllabus. That's not really a syllabus, it's just a list of dates. That's a problem. For the most part, if there's any question in your mind, if your syllabus is up to par, up to speed, check with a colleague, check with the director too. They're the ones who should be giving you feedback. As far as I know, there is nobody on campus in the provost's office or anywhere that goes around looking at individual syllabi to make sure they check out. It would just be too much, too many thousands of syllabi out there.
But you could, for example, show it to your graduate coordinator, or your advisor or somebody like that. I mean, I think that we all share syllabi fairly frequently, and that if it is your first one, that it's nice, no one would say, be surprised if you wanted some eyes on it.
Thank you so much.
If you're doing this for the first time, this is the first time this class has ever been taught, then definitely get some help. But chances are somebody's done the class in the past, and there's a copy of the syllabus somewhere that you can pull for reference purposes. Try to model it after that one too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm good. If you've got questions, let's wait until after the others.
All right, well, since I do actually use Web Canvas anyways, I brought actual handouts. And the idea that people might like stuff to take home. Interestingly enough, when I Xeroxed these this morning, the syllabus did not Xerox all the pages, so it's missing a lot of the university boilerplate stuff that Dr. Borchard was talking about. So if you see that, you'll notice that it's just a sort of sample. But I have kind of just a couple of, I think, complementary things to say. I have very similar philosophy of syllabi. On the front, you'll notice that I kind of on the same kind of logic of sort of trying to translate the ULOs, the University Undergraduate Learning Objectives, instead of using the language of learning objective and learning outcome, which I think is complicated and I'm not convinced that we've all figured out what that means. I think it's easier to draw specific things from that list of it, and this is up on the university website, and sort of really connect those outcomes to the specific things that we're doing in the class rather than generally. So this is actually this year my first attempt to do it in this kind of detailed way. But one of the things that I think is very important about a syllabus is it's really an outline for the students of what to expect in the class. And we know this as instructors, but I think this is sometimes a surprise to students. And so one of the things that I do for the when you get to we don't have week 1, but we start with week 2, is that I try to not only include all the reading and things that I want people to do, but give a title to each lecture so people kind of know what to expect, and so they can kind of see the structure of where they're going. I mean, in a history class, this is in some ways easy to do because we move chronologically through time. But this is a course that covers the period of time between 1815 and 1860, so it's a pretty short amount of time, and we tend to go kind of in thematic layers. So I explained this to them when we were talking about it at the beginning of the semester, but I think being able to kind of see those thematic layers helps them as we're starting to review for exams, and so I'll kind of remind them that the titles of the weeks and of the lectures, that they can expect to see that in the review material for the exam and things like that, and to kind of really point out those correlations. Because these are things that as graduate students are very familiar to you and you are thinking about them. But I think especially for freshmen and sophomore students, where you don't get a syllabus that looks like this in high school, that the whole kind of structure of what a syllabus is actually kind of mysterious in a way that we don't always remember. And so this is actually something that's really, I would say, influenced, particularly recently, how I started to think about not just the syllabus but assignments. A couple of years ago, I started to learn how to play tennis, which I always wanted to do, and this was sort of an interesting thing to suddenly be a student again instead of being the teacher. And very humbling, right? I would listen very carefully to what the tennis instructor would say, and I would understand exactly what he wanted me to do, and then I would not be able to do it, not once, not twice, not 4 times, or I would be able to do it, but then the next time I went back, I would not be able to do it. And this was really eye-opening to me in thinking about the ways in which I give instructions to students and the assumptions that I make about how we are or are not on the same page, but also that when people don't succeed in doing assignments the way I want them to do, it's not necessarily because they didn't try or they didn't want to, but that there is a kind of natural process of layering of understanding. That people need to do stuff once or twice or 5 times, depending on what it is, to get it right. So I've actually, in the last couple of years, really tried to rethink how I do assignments in classes to incorporate that idea in, to really catch myself skipping steps, basically. So instead of kind of sending signals to my class about like how I want them to do well, I've been trying to really model all of the steps. So some of this is easier said than done, but I also think that if you want to ask people to do hard stuff, and I like them to read primary documents written in the 19th century and filled with unfamiliar words and strange syntax. So if you'll notice here, I have sort of after the syllabus, this semester we're reading Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, which is a big, fat, weighty, fairly tough book to read, but a really great book and a really important book to read. And so one of the ways that I have them kind of practice reading this kind of book is I give them reading quizzes, sort of 1 a week, you'll see that on the syllabus, but to help them understand how to do that, I create these, at least for the first couple reading assignments, excerpts of quotations from the pages that they're reading that I think are important as a way to sort of show them how to excerpt passages out of a complicated primary text and sort of model that for them. And then we spent some time in class kind of talking about what these things really meant and why we pulled them out. And then we did some guessing about which ones I might put on the quiz. Some students who've had me before like are good at guessing that by now. And then the quiz itself, I give them a passage, and it used to be that I would just give them the passage and say, write about this passage. But I discovered that that's too big, right? That's actually, in 10 minutes, it's too much thinking to get what I want. So this is the quiz I gave them this week, and I broke down very specifically the ways in which I wanted them to think about the passage, to model for them also kind of what the project is of learning to read primary sources this way. Because they're going to write a paper at the end of the semester that's based on primary sources about slavery, and I want them to practice this intellectual technique. That this is not necessarily something that you get taught in high school at all to read. Some people do, some people don't, but that it is a real skill. So, and I'm happy to say that by breaking it down this way, even though this was the first quiz, that in a class of 25 people, more than 20 people got either 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 on this quiz, because they were able to really translate what they could see in the passage into some specific discussion, and they talk about it in a very specific way. So I think it really helps to expose the process in ways that we tend to forget. This has become, and it will become increasingly second nature to you, and to go back, right, and be that awkward person on the tennis court, or be that awkward person reading this, inscrutable document. It's really good to try to put yourself back into that spot. Then the other thing, I decided this is a new thing, and so I can't really tell you if it'll succeed or not, because we're not doing it until Tuesday. But one of the things that we do in this class is we explore the sort of transformation of political culture in the antebellum period in the United States. And this is a moment in which you have all kinds of new people participating in politics, although it's still only white men who can vote. And I really want them to understand kind of what this political culture is like. And so it occurred to me that there are all kinds of different ways to get people to talk in class, ask questions, generate discussion. But because giving toasts at these dinners is so important in this particular period in political history, and because there's some controversial toasts, famous controversial toasts, I decided that it would be fun for us to pretend to have one of these big political dinners and everybody would have to give a toast. So this handout is actually an article from the newspaper reporting on this very famous dinner where Andrew Jackson, who's president, gave a toast that was specifically designed to make his vice president, John C. Calhoun, very uncomfortable, and then Calhoun had to give a kind of response toast, and this was sort of the public recognition that their relationship was at an end, and Calhoun resigned from the vice presidency shortly after this. But one of the things that's fun about this is that we used to publish all these toasts in the newspaper. So I was able to give them some examples and say, okay, you create for yourself a kind of a person to be a political position, a state to be from, and on Tuesday we're all going to give toasts, and the idea is to try to give a toast that will make somebody else really mad about the political position that you've chosen, about tariffs or internal improvements, things that are kind of dry issues maybe otherwise. But so the idea is we did have to have a discussion about how there would be no dueling, right? Because there was dueling in the 19th century. But so what I'm hoping is that this takes this kind of dry issue like, tariffs and whether tariffs are fair or unfair, and it kind of creates a little bit more of a dynamic relationship between the students. And so I said also, right, you only have to bring one toast, but then you should have prepared some language in case somebody else makes a toast that makes you really mad about your position on the tariff or on slavery or things like that, so that you can come up with a response toast, right? So we'll see if this works. But I think that they've done enough reading now, and this is a way of also making this language, right, which they're reading, a little bit more their own. So we'll see whether that works. And then the other stuff, chopping on the other stuff, just I included is again kind of examples of my attempt to really break down the process of doing very simple things. Like if you need to propose a paper topic, in the past where I used to say, well, just tell me what you want to write your paper on. This was too big and too amorphous a question. So I've tried to create all the pieces of that process that are familiar to me but unfamiliar to them in a kind of handout so that I can see also, when I look at these things, when they hand them in, where the blank places are. And maybe the most useful one of all these handouts is the last one, I think, or almost second to last. This one, writing an introduction. Where I created for them this, oh here, it's kind of more in the middle, this 6-sentence model for writing an introduction. The introduction is the hardest thing for people to write when they're starting to write a paper. And what's great about this is that I make them write this 6-sentence introduction, which is just a paragraph, with each sentence numbered initially. And that way I can see which sentences they can't write, right? And they can see which sentences they can't write. So if they don't have a sentence 5 because they don't have a thesis statement, then I can say, okay, see you don't have a thesis statement because there's nothing here. You know, they'll literally skip the numbers, they'll leave it blank. They do all kinds of creative things to try to, you know, skip over the ones they can't write. But that gives us a really concrete way to work through that introduction and the missing pieces of the introduction and the work that the introduction needs to do for them, so that I can say, well, why don't you have sentence 3? You know, what are your issues? These are really hard sentences to write too, and so it helps with the revision of the writing to have it really graphically popped out this way, I think. And then this is a model they can use for any introduction. It's not the most beautiful introduction we'll ever read, but it works, right? And the idea that, you know, an introduction does work for you rather than just is, I think helps them kind of take those writing skills into other classes. All right.
Good morning to you all. Thank you, Dr. Greg, and Dr. Peter, the chair, Dr. Elizabeth, thank you, and ladies and gentlemen of the house. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction because my presentation is slightly different, and how I developed that curriculum syllabus has a reason. So I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch of who I am. It's not about me, but let me tell you. I'm a licensed engineer in some states. I'm also an attorney and member of the Pennsylvania Bar United States Supreme Court. I was a trial attorney for 26 years. Now I'm doing 2 PhDs concurrently, one in urban affairs and electrical engineering. I have done 5 disciplines of engineering. I was an employer, my own company of 125 people, union employees. Having said that, I have no life. So I'm coming back. So basically the curriculum or syllabus which I have developed is actually a distillate of all the stuff. One more thing. It's not about me, but it will become very obvious when I talk about that. I have 5 US patents, 6 pending. And every engineering school, they have a senior design, and they always run into these problems. So I said, I was instructed, I'm not a faculty member. So the chair and the dean said, you take this class. And what was the class? Engineering 101. There are 90 students in my class. And so I looked at the curriculum, I said, this is not working. First I looked at that. Why is that? That's the subject of my presentation. That's my name, and I've been involved 4 years now in the university. Basically, the whole question starts out with me. Who is our audience? Who are we developing this for? Well, we are dealing with millennials. Why is that important? They learn differently, very differently. They're all connected. So in the classes which I've had, they're all millennials and Gen Z, which people think, oh geez, you know, what's it all about? My class is between 18 and 27. Their whole concept is different. And the results are also obvious. The retention is not that much. So why we have to do this is to understand how you communicate. Communication, to me, is the act of the recipient, not what you said. When the jury hears you, it's not what you said, it's what they heard. So you have to be really very clear in exactly what you're doing. Look at the population demographics. 24%. Gen Z, 24%. People focus on baby boomers. the methodology which we were using before does not apply, or where certain portions applies. There are 77 billion. So what does it impact us in education business, which I'm not an educator. This is not a temporary situation. There'll be waves of people coming through. The learning process is different. Methodology is different. Unless we do that and from that perspective, and the curriculum which I prepared, which I'll show you, we will not be able to connect. So I said, why are we teaching this? Why should somebody even be in a class? Why should you even go to school? Looking for a good employment. So my starting point is what the employers are looking for. When I used to get applications this thick, half of them I threw them in the circular file. With errors and all kinds of stuff, but I'm not an employer now. So I pulled out internship. Why is an internship? That's the first job, at least in engineering, they will look for. So I said, let me look at the example, and I'm going to tailor my curriculum based on that, plus add some other stuff. Look at the stuff, 3.40 GPA. What does that mean? Well, they're coming out of high school. You have to have time management. You have to have control, listen to the instructor, and do the assignments. It's a whole new field. Otherwise, if you don't get a GPA, you won't even get in the door. It's like this. You may be the best dancer. You don't have an invitation, you can't even show it. So you need to have GPA. I've had long discussions. I have a lot of friends in the industry, which will show you. And one of the things they said, oh, should we lower the GPA? And I said, well, it's up to you, because people don't have it. And Dr. Greg said that people are not paying attention in the class, and you said it's not paying attention in the class. GPA falls down, and they fight about the grades later on. And he just points out with the criteria, which you said. It's exactly what it is. Look at the second one. I'm talking about engineering here. Transition from academics to the workforce. Very important. How do you develop a syllabus? It cannot be an abstract. Look at the second part. Must possess strong communication, interpersonal organization skills, and decision making. Engineers, by and large, just look at how can I calculate the formula, which we'll talk about that also. Fail. Work as a part of the team. These are not my words. This is what exactly the employer is looking for. Basic engineering tasks is only one of them. Safety policy and procedures. Procedures means aspects. Sexual harassment, legal aspects, contractual values. You need to understand that. You can't have certain things, you cannot use profanity, you cannot do certain things. You have to know before you start out life. Interface with engineering staff, this means you mix with people. It's all about people. It's not all about engineering, just talking about numbers. So what I said was, okay, this is what the audience is. This is what the employers are looking for. I'm going to design the syllabus. I was very, very fortunate. The Dean of Engineering and my head of department gave me absolutely carte blanche. Do whatever you think is the best. And I don't know, maybe they were crazy, but they just went ahead and gave that to me. So I said, we're going to create something else like, first of all, you understand engineering disciplines. And we'll come back to that. There is no such thing as one engineering. I took them behind Bellagio, which I'll show you some pictures. It's not about only civil engineering, electrical engineering. I've gone through chemical, civil, structural, mechanical, and I'm now in electrical. There is no such thing, it's all tied together. And unless they understand at that level, it's very difficult, because the transition becomes more difficult. So syllabus, starting out from the beginning, they should start to have an understanding of that. These are very important aspects, which I'm going to just jump through. Safety, communications, marketing. We're talking about marketing. No matter what you're doing, you're always marketing. You're always communicating. If you can't even express yourself, you cannot do this. I have a philosophy. There is no such thing as a confused sentence. It's called confused thinking. If you cannot have a clarity, you will write it accordingly and you'll speak accordingly. Especially the millennials, because they use shorthand. So I started all my classes with music. I had Neo, Rihanna, but I also played, Stewart. And there was snickering going on. I said, don't laugh. He's the guy who is signing your paychecks. So it is very, very different understanding basic field tours, mandatory. We talked about attendance. So people will ask, I'll go there, I'll Google it on the internet. But they were designed in such a manner, you cannot get it from the internet. We'll show you that. It had two components to it for the curriculum. One is the actual trip itself, and the other was report writing, because that's what they will expect them to do in the field. So one person says, so I've taken them to very complex, they don't know all the stuff, so I give them the questions. They have to have the questions answered. And 50% for the writing report and 50% on the trip. Software programming, everyone wants to jump in. They want to be multi-millionaires instantly. It's very important to understand what it's all about. And this is first year. I'm giving them exposure. You have driverless cars. You have, basically drones, which I'm involved in, definitely in drones. How do you distribute different technology? People don't understand that. I gave a paper in Saudi Arabia, and I talked about collision of technology and privacy. By the way, privacy is not even listed in the Constitution. It is creature of the case law and amendments. So I wrote a paper on that, how are you going to do that? We had a classic, I'm not going to mention names. They were doing a project in UNLV. They were collecting data based on GPS. No good. And what happened is, when they did this, they were stopped because of violation of the privacy. Engineering is here, law doesn't catch up. And you have to understand that. So that's one of the things I try to tell the students when you're developing curriculum, that listen, this is, you cannot look at just blinders. The case is United States versus Jones. And what happened is, it was in Maryland. This person stuck a GPS, and there were other technical issues, legal issues, which I'm not going to get into. Basically, the Supreme Court unanimously said he can't do that. He cannot collect data. Well, they just developed a technology to collect data. Can't use it. So had they known earlier, or at least they have been, thought about it, or at least been given a little bit about it before, they would have at least thought about thinking. I think Socrates said that. He said, I cannot teach you anything. But all I can do is to tell you how to think. I'm nowhere near there, but basically, I want them to understand what you're exposed to the real world, because that's exactly what you will be exposed to. Mathematics, the dropout rate in engineering is substantial. And the reason it's substantial is mathematics. But actually, that's the easiest part for me. 2 times 2 is 4. Always. Not like going to court. 2 times 2, 3.5 close enough to 4, 6.5 close enough to 4, depending on how you presented the math. So to me, that's the easy part, but you have to put in effort to understand that. So we talk about all these matters. Talk about ethics. You implode. And cases, actually 2 cases, federal legislation, Sarbanes-Oxley Act was exactly for that, which was enacted. Ethics, Volcom, Enron, and all other stuff which is there. Very, very important. There's each standard, each discipline, each profession has a code of ethics. A paper is coming out, I'm authoring with one of the persons from the provost's office on ethics. Exactly what you should do. If your boss tells you, hey, you substitute smaller chip, wrong chip, will save money. Are you going to do this? You have to think about it. You have a family, you have children, these are issues, wrestling with issues. And you get into a lot of stuff, philosophical, ethical issues. International students, most of the stuff, we don't even make anything here. Arduino, for all the micro, is made in Italy. So we have to learn about the international stuff. So we have to give them exposure. Real life examples. The millennials and a lot of the other similar generations do not connect unless you show them real life example. It's all abstract. They can just learn it, just put it away. I've got to show them what real life is. Team projects. I told you about from the curriculum, team projects. I don't have any final exam. And he said, what do you mean you don't have any final exam? I said, the reason I don't have final exam is the real test is outside. But I give them 2 projects. If they haven't read, if they haven't done, they will not pass it. What are those projects? Real life. One is lighting the lamp, touch screen. So we teach them a little bit about that, but they have to do research and design a project. They have to show, if my TA is another one, that it works. If it doesn't, that's a midterm. The final project is a home alarm system. Design it all digitally. Show me how exactly it works. If it doesn't work, you don't make it. So that to me is the exam, not from engineering standpoint, but it's not for other disciplines. So I said, now we're going to take them to the field trips, and I'm going to be very quick. So I have lots of connections, and I've said that before. So I imposed on my posts. He says, okay, we'll do this. How many students? 90. Oh my God. How many are you bringing? What are you doing to us? So I took them to McCarran. So I had them at the airport. I asked them to change the name to say UNLV Engineering. He said, how do you do that? I said, I can't tell you that. These are my connections. This is the control room. When you go inside the McCarran, you don't see this. Every step of your stuff is known. You can see all the cars going around on the freeways and everything. These are all technical stuff. This is application. These are first-year students. So okay, now that's all right. Let's go down to the ramp. Why do you want to go to the ramp? Because we have Wi-Fi systems, electrical systems. They're interfering with this thing. No longer they control with all the signals like this. It's all Wi-Fi systems. How do you do that? Also, the baggage is the most sophisticated system, but it's confidential. But I took them there. All of our bags has a small chip in it when you put this tag on. All the bags are coming through real quickly. They're all scanned 100%. And you have to be very careful because you cannot delay it. Because it delays the flights and all the stuff. How do you design a system? So now they can put that in perspective. This RFID, I'm going to look at that. You have to be designed for all the stuff, backup systems and all, along those lines. These are the number of planes, by the way, in the United States flying at a particular time. So they will say, why do you do that? Is just to show off? No. You have to make sure there's no interference. If I'm flying heavy, United, and someone else, I'm not talking to the person on a different airport. You have to understand that. This is McCarran's. You've seen this going down on 15. They don't. By the way, a lot of places don't allow tours. This is not like you just call up and say, "Can I have a tour?" No. These are my friends. So I said, I'm going to take them down to Ivanpah. This is a solar field. Why solar field? Well, the national debate is on climate change. There's solar, and all the coal plants are going to be phased out. So what are you going to do? This is CSP, the main designers from Israel, and I just happen to have connections there. But see, this is a solar field, right in the field itself, and I'm going to pass this quickly. This is the control room, and it's a very interesting thing we learned. This is right here. You can see where the sun is, and how the power is being generated. By the way, all the power generated goes to California. It's all on the big grid. So these students, I took the students there. This is halfway in the tower. They got all excited. Now they're engaged. And you can see, these are some of them because I cannot take them so much in an elevator. So I have to take so many all the time, This is down where the turbines are. And there's a different group. And mechanical, all the electricals, everybody's there. So the point I was trying to make earlier, I'm tying it together, there's no one engineering. So when you're designing a curriculum, it has to mix in with everything. And if you don't know it, invite guest speakers. I took them to Bellagio Fountains. They don't give tours. Well, everybody knows about it. So I said, and he said, oh my God, you're bringing 2 buses, we will have all these problems. I says, those are secondary details. This is just the fountains. But how do they run? What exactly are you going to do? You're going to be engineers. This is first year students. By the way, the Society of Women Engineers found out, they've been joining me. So they also came along. So more the merrier, I said. This is where, let me go back. This is in the back. This is where you control all the functions right there. Only 3 people have gone there for just a couple of senators and myself and my friend. And we can play the music to activate them. I think we started this 9 o'clock in the morning, unprecedented, so, but these are some of the lights and all the stuff. Shooters, how far do you go? And we said, okay, we're going to have a fog now. So we started a fog, program. And so every student can understand exactly the ultimate. I took them behind O. I don't have the pictures here. Well, the trapeze is, 50, 60 feet. They're banking your life on that. They're going to fall down. What are you going to do? So the design of the curriculum goes back to that. It's not engineering, is that you have to expose them. And there's another aspect to it. All these people meet the potential employers. There's a hidden agenda. So they meet the employers and say, okay, you can do that. And remember the GPA. So it comes back to UNLV. You better do a good job in UNLV. You better go to school in UNLV. Otherwise, you can't even go there. How's the water going in there? Okay, this is natural gas plant. And Nevada Energy. These are the type of plants going to be built in the future. Control our lives. The reason I'm doing doctorate in electrical computer engineering is a reason for it. Everything we do is electrical. The moment you get up for coffee, pick up your phone, the car, everything's involved. And it's more complex. My research is in graphene. Graphene is a miracle material. The Nobel Prize was given in 2010. So we're still in the stages of characterization. But this is something they need to know, from the perspective. Then I took them down to Creech Air Force Base. We hear about the drones, predator drones, drone strikes. What are those? How do you control them? So I have some friends, I got them briefing about how it's controlled. But they didn't, of course, they don't give you everything. What does it look like? This is MQ-9. This is a Reaper. And this one is loaded. But they get to see it. They see, feel, and touch it. This is predators. You hear about this all the time. So give them a good feeling, exactly what this is all about. Everything comes into the curriculum program. This is SIDAM. SIDAM, people say, well, we're all engineers. This was a nuclear test done in 1962, before some of the people were born. The device was 630 feet down, 130 kilotons, and nuclear test was done. You can see it from the space. It's all over the place. It's very famous. It's now a historic site. What does it look like? What kind of damage you can create? Safety and all this stuff. So I took my students down to there, and we can go down 300 feet where they do some testing. Let's put it this way. That's the end. Thank you, and I'm open for questions. So the presentation curriculum which I had prepared is geared towards for people getting a job, because that's the ultimate aspect. Open questions.
At the beginning, you had mentioned you use music.
Yes.
How do you, do you just have them sit and listen to the music? Or
No. I get there about, the class is 8:30. I get there at 8:20.
Okay, so while they're coming in, you've got
They listen to
playing.
music.
Okay.
And a lot of times when I first start out, they think oh God, this must be the wrong class. I said, no, come on, this is not. This is wrong. They want to go out. From the perspective. Very non-traditional. I went to Berkeley, maybe that's one of the reasons. Everything upside down for me. We challenge everything, we do discuss anything, and I went to the late 70s, so you can understand what Berkeley was. That's where I was. So everything is different, challenge authority, do everything, So yeah, music we do, it breaks the ice. People get involved, and what I'm doing really is subconsciously communicating with them. I'm playing their kind of music. I mean, some of the music I like, but some of them I don't. But it's not about me. It's about them. I exist because of them. The university exists because of them. So I have to cater towards them. Questions? If I sound unusually clear, that means you must have misunderstood. Me?
Not necessarily a question, but
Alright.
kind of another connection kind of thing for you. I have connections at JPL.
Excellent.
In Pasadena. and
Excellent.
I've actually gotten to go into the lab and actually see some of their stuff, so if your students ever want to
Excellent.
go observe there.
Well, I'm not teaching this, but I think good to know. The descent to the Mars, right? Mercury, that's right, so, photographing. Yes, very good, excellent. See, those things are really good, what you have, you engage the people. I will even go beyond that. I'm not an educator of social sciences, but I think a trip like that, because they're part of society, you engage them. Maybe one trip should be there, to go and see, just like you're saying, and maybe you can tie it with journalism and tie it with, other aspects. Maybe write a report or something, what kind of, and you have to send a press release,
Did you need an okay from IRB to go on any of those trips?
IRB doesn't apply. But I have IRB for other stuff. No, IRB doesn't apply because we're not doing human research. I have to have permission from the hosts and the Defense Department. Okay.
Do you do the field tours during class time, or how do you negotiate
That
certain
was an
schedules?
excellent question. When I first started out, I had a lot of resistance. They said, well, the students are not going to do that. I said, well, I'm going to do it. So it was kind of a battle for some degree. And I told the students up front from the class 1, they don't have to take this class. They can take some other first-year engineering experience. I almost had a 0 dropout. They changed it from other classes. I had to write excuses for them, for that they're attending this class because it's mandatory. You cannot do this going on a field trip and doing a Google search. And the point I was trying to make to them is, in life, you can't get everything from Google. You have to understand certain things. And they were designed especially for that. Yes?
So the content of engineering is pretty heavy. So how do you deal with that in the classroom when you lecture? Like how much of it is lecture and how much of it is like application?
We have only one semester here, so it's introduction. So basically we talk about, like, for example, circuitry. So we don't talk about huge amount because it's a 4-year course, but we introduce concepts. What's voltage? What's amps? How does it apply in real life? Then you take them to show the transformers, how the power is generated. So it's basically semiconductors. What's the difference? What's a transistor? So we give them some, basically some terminology. My experience, all professions are very similar. The difference is terminology, understanding the vocabulary. If you cannot communicate, I cannot talk to Dr. Greg because he has certain terminology and he'll say, what are you talking about? So we have to really understand that. So the whole idea is to actually just give them a seed for understanding that there are other things which you need to know, and the lingo, for lack of a better word. So we don't teach all this stuff, of course not, we cannot. It's a 4-year course. We talked about intelligent systems, robotics. So I instructed them, how do you recognize images? And, these are things which they have to deal with. And we're getting outside the realm of, humanity into robotics. And transition is happening. Wireless cars, I was telling somebody else, they're going to change the dynamics workforce. So what are you talking about? There will be no streetlights. There don't need to be. Because they will communicate with this stuff. Well, if you can do that, there are legal issues. What if you get into an accident? Someone will say, well, I got hit by a driverless car 60 feet away. Well, it can't be, because Wi-Fi is probably 20 feet effective range. So just to get an idea in their minds, to expose them, that's the whole purpose.
I have a question for all three. So, whether it's like a 100 level class or 400 level class, I always get questions from students throughout the semester that, when is your office hours? Where is your office? When is the midterm? And when is the final exam? What time? I mean, after you created really nice syllabus, And even like on the first week of the class, we go over together in class, we still get these questions that they can find answers to the syllabus. So how do you deal with those, and how do you make sure that students read and understood and consult the syllabus throughout the semester?
It happens. You're absolutely right. The initial impulse is to get frustrated and say, oh, it's not a syllabus. I guess the best reaction is just to keep in mind your class is not the only class they're taking. Sometimes people genuinely do get overwhelmed and confused, and they've lost track of which syllabus belonged to which person in which class. And they're juggling in their brains some details that don't always add up. So I guess patience helps more than anything. They should be ultimately responsible for following this, yes, but they just don't. Whatever reason.
I often say that it's in the syllabus, it's on the syllabus,
And it
or
is.
syllabus states, but because it's kind of like professional skills that you need, like you said, then be responsible and find answers on your own. So
The way I have a different, unique situation for office hours, I'll tell you. Greg, well, one of the things I want to tell you is that you were asking IRB. I have, everyone goes on a field trip, I ask them to sign a release indemnities. And some of them are not even 18. So they have to get an approval from there, from perspective. So we get the legal department, of course, I looked at that, just from that. Answer to your question, my office is in SEB on the first floor. You can't even get in because you're in Marlowe card. So what I do is, I said, I'm going to meet you 15 minutes before. If someone wants to make an appointment, I'm available. If everything else fails, we'll meet in front of Einstein's, have a cup of coffee. On top of that, we have labs. So what they learn in the engineering, they learn in the lab. CV100 logics and all that stuff. So by the time, hopefully, they get, some understanding, what's going on, from the perspective. I don't know if that answers your question.
I would say, sometimes that's laziness, right, where people aren't bothering to look at the syllabus. Other times I think it is a way of starting the conversation, right? That there's a certain level of intimidation in starting those conversations. So rather than, I agree sometimes it's here. I have a student in my class this semester who at the end of every class asks me if there's homework for the next class. And every day I say to him with a big smile on my face, yeah, it's on the syllabus, the homework's always on the syllabus.
Yes.
And every day he asks me that. And I thought, is this kid a freshman? But he's a junior, right? This is just his way of making conversation. So I would say if someone asks you when your office hours are, that's great. Because a lot of people don't even want to come to office hours, period. So that, it's also an opportunity for you to do two things. One, tell them when your office hours are. And also say, this is the reason we put office hours on the syllabus, so that no matter what, you can always find it. So that, there will always be people who are too lazy to look at the syllabus, and you'll be able to tell, I think, over time, because those students will be lazy in other aspects of the course too. But sometimes it really is just the easiest way to make an overture, where those relationships are unfamiliar.
I'm going to endorse what Dr. Blue is saying. When you give my syllabus has every date on it exactly, they still ask, you haven't read it, just like exactly what you said. And they don't read it, they miss a class, they lose points. I tell in my class, it's very easy to get an A and very easy to get an F. No, there's nothing in between, because the points are divided. If they miss a class for certain things, nothing you can do, just like you said.
But there's one question that I still wrestle with. I don't know how to answer it really, and it happens too much. Somebody will be gone for whatever reason, they'll show up the next session and say, did I miss anything important? You can answer that a whole bunch of ways, but ultimately the only one that works, the answer is yes. And that's it. So you have to be creative. And I've learned the hard way, losing my temper doesn't help anything. It just makes it worse. worse, really, because people get offended, upset, and they tell their classmates and all the rest, and get this downwards.
And I also think you can make, I mean, this is slightly not quite the same question you're asking, but, you know, when there is, right, did I miss anything important? Or, you know, if you give an exam and there are some people who study for exams and some people who don't, and sometimes people who don't study for exams don't feel as good about how they did on the exam as they could if they'd studied. So I had one class one semester where there was kind of a group of people who were, I would say, not probably working to their full potential, but very vocal about their disgruntlement. So we just, you know, there's something to be said for kind of a little bit of public bloodletting. So I said, okay, let's talk about the exam, and I'll explain, you know, why I do what I do, and you can, you know, give me some feedback if you have better suggestions about how it should go. This gave me an opportunity to say the logic. It gave them an opportunity to vent, and then they started proposing all these alternate exam formats. And then the people who had studied for the exam and had done well started to get worried, and then they started to chime in, and they were like, well, you know, if you studied for the timelines, actually, they weren't that hard, right? And then another person said, well, you know, we already know what the exam will look like, so we don't really want to change it. So there was this kind of dynamic in the classroom where opening that up for discussion actually created, for me, I mean, I didn't know this would happen, but then it was clear that the people, and this was showed in the grades, that some people had studied and some people hadn't, but that kind of exposure works better in public rather than me kind of wagging my finger and saying, well, you should really study harder. And so as a result, I actually wasn't going to change the exam format at all, but there's no harm in sort of, you know, at least offering the illusion of free will.
One comment I would make, suggestion would make is that I encourage the first class, I give them 15 minutes to form groups, a team. Something happens to somebody, you have the phone numbers, you have all the stuff, and you can just do that so they don't miss anything. And that format, you know, we've used it in law school. By the way, everybody knows the difference between a lawyer and an attorney? Huh? You know that?
I just read that about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, all attorneys are lawyers, but not all lawyers are attorneys. In other words, lawyers cannot, just because you graduate from this thing, you cannot represent people. And so the first thing I do when I go to trial is to see if he's an attorney. And then I make a motion, you know, Your Honor, he's not a licensed attorney, he's not a licensed. So what we do is, what I tell them is to form groups from the first class, 15 minutes after the introductions. And I always ask them why they're there. I was surprised there are some people from business schools, some from entertainment engineering, because they want to go on field trips, you know, from the perspective. So that's my recommendation, for lack of anything better.
I guess one of the things that I was hoping to get out of this is that one of the things I struggle with trying to create assignments and stuff is because you're trying to also build that critical thinking skill and then trying to build some of those job, you know, what they need in the workforce. But how do you go about creating an assignment where you're guiding them but without telling them exactly how to do it? Like, how do you guys find a way to like kind of balance that? Because in some of the classes that I get, they want to sort of, I'm finding that the generation of the students that it was like they're teaching to the test and stuff, and so they just want to learn, tell me how to be, you know, how to pass the test kind of thing, where they want you to tell them everything they need to know. But how do you engage like some of the critical thinking, whereas you also like kind of challenge them to go out and do things on their own, but also give them a clear criteria of like.
I have done, for example, you know, Blu-ray. Don't tell me, everyone knows Blu-ray. They can Google it. Not enough. Tell me the depth, tell me the wavelength, tell me all the details, which means research. And some people have come back and say, well, where do you find that? I said, where would you find that? So every semester, I had a librarian come to my suit from STEM, talk about 1 hour, the resources you have available. So I'm not the resource, the library is the resource, and you are the resource. So just, you are absolutely fantastic question, because you can't be spoon feeding them.
Yeah.
Because once you start that, there's no way stopping. So tell me all the details, you know. Then I need to confuse them further. I said, tell me the difference between Blu-ray and Bluetooth. So all they heard was blue. And there's messed up. But that was by design. So now you tell me, so they'll start thinking in those terms. I mean, I don't know how this applies here, but from my perspective, give them enough of it just to start in the libraries of research. And I had the librarian come 1 hour presentation, and they had put on an excellent presentation of what the resources are. So,
I think one way to do that, and this is very similar, but maybe like also structuring it, is if you structure things around questions rather than where they're generating a question rather than generating an answer, it's a little more dynamic. Right, teaching to the test is sort of like, well, what do you want? What are we supposed to know? So when I always do a review sheet for exams, even though as a student myself, I never got a review sheet. And so I used to have a kind of allergy to those things. But the reason I give a review sheet is that I actually want to give a harder exam. And that I found that to give a harder exam, to give an essay exam, I get better results if I give a review sheet. So I put one of the review sheets in the packet. I do a list of key people and terms, but a pretty long list, right? And students complain bitterly that the list is too long, and I always happily suggest that I could give them the whole list, right, which is longer. And then I'll give them somewhere between 5 and 7 essay questions, and I usually will pull the essay questions right out of those ones I've already written and put them on the test. The idea being that everybody can write a better essay if they've given a little thought before, and that most people don't know how to write an essay, at least early on in their college career, or do it well. And so that gives me an opportunity to kind of march them through the process, to sort of show them. We have a methods class for sophomore history majors, and one of the things when I teach that class is I make them write the exam questions, which is actually much harder than writing the answers because, well, you can ask a good question, you already know the answer. But so I think turning it inside out makes, even if you're spoon feeding the structure, if you flip it from answers to questions, it helps push them toward critical thinking.
Structure definitely helps. With the syllabus and the assignments themselves, they should work together, the syllabus schedule and the assignments along the way. I found whether it's a grad level class or an undergrad level class, a mistake is just to throw everything at everyone and all at the same time at the very beginning and say, okay, basic requirement for this, say, grad level class is to write a 20 to 30 page paper using lit review methods, findings, and conclusion. So people just they get overwhelmed by this. It's the same with an undergrad class where in reporting, the ultimate goal is to get a publishable news story. The way you can do this effectively is just to go in increments along the way and integrate all of the assignments so that they work towards that final project. Where if it were a grad level paper, okay, about a third of the way through the class, everyone is required to submit an annotated bibliography and a literature review. And then we work in a methods section, and then towards the end of the semester, a draft is due, an initial draft, so that along the way you've got these benchmarks where you're making sure that people are following the structure of the course itself, plus the overall assignment too. If we were to try to put everyone on autopilot for 15 weeks, it just end up with chaos and nonsense towards the end. So there is some maintenance that goes into this on the instructors and to make sure that people don't get steered off in the wrong direction.
There's also that theory, right, that you have to say everything 3 times so that people will. And this is actually really true, I think. Not necessarily even because people aren't paying attention, but that we learn orally differently than we learn in writing, and so the balance of those things is important. And so, right, when we build all that stuff, that kind of the cumulative stuff into the course and the syllabus because that's what we want them to do, but there's really no harm in pointing it out. The people will, I always say that, you shouldn't read Moby Dick until you're ready to read Moby Dick, because if you have to read it before you're ready, it stinks. And then if you're ready to read it, it's awesome, right? And life's like that too. So syllabus, some kids are good at reading the syllabus, are good at knowing they should go to the library, and other kids need a couple of passes at it before they figure it out. And that requires a level of patience that's sometimes difficult to muster, but has great payoff also.
I want to add one of the things. I ask people, and this sounds very rudimentary, exactly how I want my reports. Staple on the top left, spacing, what kind of papers, and go to the writing clinic. You know, I said you have to, at least for me, you know, I don't write so well, but I have to take at least 5 drafts before I get to the stage. When I look the second draft, I look at that, who the Yahoo wrote this? It's me, you know, and then I have to recorrect it. So I said, don't turn it in with incomplete sentences and all that stuff, go to the writing clinic. And you were saying it was a lot of trouble for them, you know, just to do that. But they can see the difference, you know, and grade shows it. You know, I don't understand what you're saying. So, and I told them the communication is a very complex process. You're thinking, you're speaking, someone is listening, translating in the brain, and hopefully you're on the same wavelength. And I tell them, I didn't say what you meant. Of course not, because that's not what I was saying. So anyway, my way of thinking is that you need to have somehow I pressure them, for lack of a better word, you have to go to the clinic, you have to go to the library. You know, just cannot sit at home and just Google it and do that. Just cannot do it.
The other thing is you can always ask, I think it's always better to err on the side of making things too hard. You can always retrench. You can always, you know, give opportunities to redo or to rethink, or you can, you know, if everybody really isn't getting it. But if you push people to the edge, I think, a little bit of what they are expecting, they'll surprise themselves. And I think that actually helps you help them. That we tend, you know, it's the same question as with the GPA. Should we lower it? I don't think so, right? Because there's a reason why we have that GPA, and that GPA means something. There's a reason why you ask people to read, you know, hard documents or long books like Democracy in America. Do they want to do it? No, but it's good. When else will they have the chance for somebody to kind of create those parameters? And so we have to be ambitious for them to help them be ambitious for themselves.
So we're about at 11:30, so I think we should probably wrap it up here. I will say one thing that impressed me from what we've shared today is how creative this process is. Notice how there's not it's not as simple as just Googling a template for a syllabus and running with it, but there's a lot of creative thought process that goes into why is my syllabus structured the way it is? What purposes does it serve? It serves as a guiding document to students about when exams are, when graded assignments are coming up, but also as a defense when they miss class and they come back to ask if they can make things up. It has required pieces in there that satisfy legal issues and so forth. And then as far as assignments, what are we asking them to do and why are we asking them to do those things? We want them to learn, we want them to be motivated, we want them to have success beyond UNLV and the workforce. We want to satisfy assessment needs at the university level, which are part of accreditation, something that I didn't think of several years ago, but now I see the rationale for. So a very creative process, and all of you will continue to sort of work through this in your own context as well. So thanks to all of you for coming and joining us this morning, and to our panelists for their